Wonderful. Okay, Ian, you're next.
Sorry, my mouth was full. I may have brief comments because I don't have a lot of experience as a reader or a writer of content of this length. But if we're looking at just Golden Hour in the greater or in the Phoenix metropolitan area, I agree with what's been said that I thought that the protagonist was compelling. I've always been in that spot where I'm trying to merge into traffic and it doesn't work because everybody else, I guess, is a terrible driver, which is, I think, what everybody feels like when they're driving. And I like that feeling of connection with a random stranger on the street, even with those initial appraisals there. As far as stuff that I would want to talk about, again, I don't have a lot of context for this length of work, so it's hard for me to structure my feedback. I may just listen to what other comments are and see if I can get a feel for it. My thought is just that there's not a lot of change that takes place. There's kind of one central event, and that's the backing up to allow the other person to pass across there. So it doesn't give me a lot to hold on to, but what it does, I enjoyed. I like good guys, and this was a good guy move to let the other person with the Chihuahua cross. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Ian. Colin.
Yeah, pretty similar. I like the imagery. I thought the main character was in a relatable situation. I thought it was good use of the second person. I know that that's usually kind of weird, but I thought it worked really well here. But yeah, I mean, reading pieces that are this short, it always kind of leaves me with like, I'm not sure what to take away from it. So I think that was the one thing that's lacking, but I think that's kind of any story that's going to be this short. I would probably feel the same way. So yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks, Colin. Adine.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was different from what we've seen in the Critiquery so far. I don't think we've had flash fiction, and so that was a really interesting departure. I think like people have said so far, I would struggle to add a lot of comment. I mean, okay, from what I can say, there's some wonderful imagery. There's a clear focus on painting a picture. There's a relatable sequence. There is a human moment here. It ends with something that feels like it should mean something, but and I'm unable to parse what that is because I suck, I guess. But I don't know how. I'm not entirely sure how to make a critique in terms of the writing beyond. I think that just because I think as other people may have struggled with, I'm not sure of the conventions of that style of the style of fiction, and I like it. So it's like, other than to say that I enjoy it, I'm not sure how else to analyze it.
Yes, I will go last and say, like everybody else, that it is a bit defying my ability to critique just because it is so short. And I really am, like a lot of other people have said, not well versed in this length of writing. I will say that, like other people, I thought it sets a mood, like it has a feeling there. It's certainly relatable. I a little like Adine, I was struggling with what to take from it, or if I was supposed to take anything from it, or what the meaning of it was, or if it was really just to be kind of almost like a still life of a moment in time, and just capture it for no other reason but to capture it. So I think for me, knowing the author's purpose in this would help. That for me was the one thing I wasn't sure about, was because I just didn't know what the goal was. If there was any, or how that was. So I'd be interested to hear about that. Okay, so with that said, because we all had a little bit of trouble coming up with a way into a critique, I will definitely go to the author's questions first, although I know Ian had a comment that I'll get to in a bit here. Okay, so the first question was, does it seem like this, I'm going to just do it for this particular story, does it seem like this story could stand on its own? or did people feel it needed to be a part of a larger set of stories? Adine, your
Ah,
thoughts?
you suck. Both, to give a terrible, frustrating answer, it and it entirely depends on, because okay, I will experience art which I have literally no idea what's happening, but it is complete in the author's vision or the creator's vision, and it's complete for other people who experience it. So in that way, I think it's difficult to put a cap or to give a clear answer to this question without first assuming a bunch of things that may be incorrect. What's the point? Et cetera, et cetera. I guess from there, we've already gone over it. And so if the point is to explore more or to be a full and complete story and match any kind of standard story convention in terms of arc or trajectory or etc., add whatever you want there, then I think it probably needs more. But if the point was just to provide a snapshot of something interesting and be beautifully written, then I think the story succeeds wonderfully. So I think, again, it just depends on the author's goals, and we probably will end up repeating this, I think. But I'm definitely interested to hear the author's thoughts on what the point was, or what it was building to.
Yes, I was about to bring in Eli, because I do think that would be pretty helpful moving forward with the rest of the stories. Ian, before I do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that, that trying to define the structure of a story with such little space is challenging, but the way that I think about it is as a character with a desire who experiences an obstacle, internal or external, that they then either overcome or don't. And with that like basic structural formula, this counts as a story. You've got a character who wants to do something and there's an obstacle and he has to have a moment of self-reflection, or she. I read it as masculine because it's you and I am identifying as male. So that's why I might say he, referring to this protagonist. But so in that sense, I would consider it as like fitting the bill for a story. But the way that the question is phrased, would it be appropriate as a package or could the story stand on their own? I think that does warrant a little bit more unpacking as far as what that package looks like. The way that these stories are all connected, either thematically or structurally, is a question that I would like to hear from the author. But in terms of it standing on its own, within the right context, if it's in a zine or a short story collection, or there's sites that are dedicated to this kind of like 30-second fiction stuff, it may well be able to do it just on its own without the other stories.
Yeah, I could see this fitting into. I mean, I don't know what magazines still do this, but I'm sure there's some, the New Yorker or other magazines, where I could see you reading along these other articles, or maybe a photo essay and then this short story. And in this case, I guess some evocative description or whatnot shows up for a small portion of the page, and then the magazine moves on to some other topic. And I could see this fitting into something like that really well. I was just going to say before you go to Eli, his second question, I think it's the second question, right? It was about whether or not these are trapped as vignettes, and the third question, I guess, or whether they are considered stories. I forgot exactly what a vignette, or how it's described. And when I looked it up, I thought this first story of all of them really fit perfectly into what the description of a vignette was. And yeah, it doesn't. And I guess I would just say that it seems to me, thinking about it now, that it could be analogous with a short piece of poetry. It doesn't necessarily have to tell a story. It could just describe something or show something, express an emotion. Leave it up to the reader to interpret, but so I'll shut up.
You don't need to. Any other thoughts on that idea of the story standing on its own? Any other questions, really? Because I do want to bounce around between these. But before I do that, I do want to ask Eli, just because I want to know maybe a little bit more about how to go through these stories. Eli, would you prefer that we went through them one by one, or is there a way that we should be thinking about these as a group? Anything like that?
So I kind of organizing my thoughts. I would absolutely love hearing feedback for each individual story, but there's only an hour, so I feel like that is kind of also a tall task. So like if the I kind of feel like it's up to y'all if y'all have like any sort of like if you see a connection, or if you are like, if you I don't know how to address this. I like if you see them as a collection, if you have feedback on what on it as a whole. It's either or, honestly. I kind of enjoyed hearing this about Golden, like about this first story. I definitely found it helpful.
Oh, okay. That's all that
But
matters.
I also feel like if we don't really need to stick around on anyone too long. Like if there's anyone, if anything like sticks out, then I would love to hear that about an individual story. But I don't think we necessarily need to like do the whole minute on from everybody on each one, because I don't
Cool.
think we quite have the time for that.
Perfect. On that note, I will, unless people have more they really want to get to with Golden Hour, move on to Double Date. Is that okay with everybody? Yes. Okay, great. So let's just move on to Double Date, and as Eli suggested, forego the usual minute and just get right into it. And I will just open the floor to people have thoughts on it, things they want to talk about with it, things they thought worked or didn't work. People, jump in, or I will call on you. Ray, yes.
I'll go. So yeah, I I didn't really think of them each as, or I didn't write or come up with a critique for each individual one. I just answered the 3 questions. But of all the stories, I found this one the most intriguing. The run-on sentence made it difficult to read. But of all the stories, one of the questions was, can this stand alone as a story? And of course, it's already a story. But I saw a lot of potential for development in it to make it more of a short story, less stylistic, more traditional maybe. But I felt there was a plot in this one that I was really grabbed by, more so than the other pieces in this submission.
All right. Other thoughts on Double Date?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The style, I mean, it's certainly something that I'm not used to reading. I felt like I struggled most with the terminology and the language in places, and I'm assuming that is either they're cultural or like technological references or something that either I'm not used to because they don't spend enough time on TikTok or Instagram or something like that, or something else. But I also was very intrigued and interested in that because it helped me step outside of my normal realm of experience. So I really appreciated that aspect of it from my perspective. But like Ray said, I found the story interesting, and I think it's a great window into just, you know, what some 20-year-old might be thinking when they're on a date, you know, and they're excited to meet someone and they're single, and it definitely conveyed that energy and interest, and yeah.
Ian, yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to echo what Ray and Brad have said as far as, man, Ray Bradbury just got stuck in my head. So I'm going to echo what they said about the language, in that was the biggest obstacle for me accessibly for reading the story. I agree that there seems to be some kind of techno, there's a lot of adding and a lot of kind of online speak that goes on in there, which was an obstacle, but it wasn't a deal breaker. And I'll echo that the characterization was really solid, and the fact that the character had tension in their mind about what was happening, what was going to happen, was also really compelling. So I'll second those ideas that, like, in terms of story function, there was a lot more to bite into here than I felt like there was in Golden Hour. That being said, there was a point where I started to disengage from the story, and I think it was when the main character, who I don't know that he's got a name in this one. I don't know if it's a he. The main character, I don't know. They studied psychology in college, which makes it sound like college is in the past. And they and Birat, I believe, or Bonnie, are both psychology majors. And maybe I just don't know enough psychology majors, but it sounded kind of asynchronous or incompatible. It didn't sound plausible that a psychology graduate would talk like this to me. And I think that that's probably more of a limitation of my imagination than of the characterization in the story. But as feedback, depending on the target audience, they may be coming from a similar background and they may be just as perplexed. That was the most confusing element of it for me. But otherwise, I agree that it had a good story feel. It had some really solid details. And once I got over the run-on sentence structure, I was able to read it and get a lot out of it.
This one felt like the least purposeful, or the least maybe thematically motivated out of the stories we saw. I compared to, they have such great names. What is it? The love, something is my love language, and a warmth at the base of your skull. And there's another one. The last three actually, I think, are the strongest ones. But this one felt like the least directed to a mood or to a vibe or to an aesthetic, even though it has the strongest aesthetic, I think, out of all of them. And I think part of that is for me that it didn't, the structure, the choices in the language of the, like using run-on sentences specifically evokes a sense of like youth and maybe carefree, maybe beat poet kind of counterculturalism. But I didn't see a purpose to which choices were made to syntax and grammar so much as they all contributed to this one singular effort, but I didn't see how each individual choice made more sense than any other random use of parentheses or exclamation points, etc. So that made it more difficult to see the story as purposeful, as moving somewhere. And the ending is probably, to me, the weakest ending out of all of them, and I think it's because the rest of the stories all left me with a feeling, that when you read a short story, you just have a feeling that it means something, even if it totally doesn't. And this one, I didn't have that when I finished it. So I know that's kind of a lot of subjective, but considering the nature of these stories is almost poetic first, and then a story second, I would think this one, I wouldn't say it needs the most work, but maybe I found it the least thematically clear or emotionally resonant.
Yeah, I would agree with it, Dean, on the idea of it didn't feel like it necessary. It seemed kind of like, and with all these stories, it seems like we're kind of telescoping into a moment or something happening, and kind of without much filter, getting whatever is happening, kind of like I said, like a still life or something, where you're just kind of getting a snapshot, like Humans of New York or something, where it's just a story. It's not necessarily supposed to be anything else. I think a lot of stories feel like they're trying very hard to be something. I know all of mine do, because I've been told that's what they have to do. But this one probably felt like the least directed, like Ideen said. So if one of the questions is kind of, do these all feel like they're together in terms of style, this one felt like it probably stood out the most as not part of that, if that's a question that you had. And then I would say I really liked the voice. I think it was interesting and certainly unique. I wasn't sure, like Ideen, about some of the choices to put different things in different places. If they were just references I didn't understand, like, having shit and having the T in parentheses. I wasn't sure if that was just something that those young people do these days and I didn't know about it, or what. But I really enjoyed it, and it took me through the piece and made it work pretty well for me, which yeah, I enjoyed that one. I thought it felt realistic.
Oh, there's this great line in it. And it made me laugh, genuinely laugh. And it's where the narrator is commenting on Bonnie's use of vocal fry and how she doesn't care about consonants at all. And so, whatever you do, Eli, please keep that line or give it to me and let me steal it, because I love that.
And then I would say somebody mentioned the age, and I do think that I would think it was Ian mentioning the psychology degree. I didn't really think about that, but now looking at it, I would have guessed younger. I would have guessed freshman in college. Just the pure enthusiasm for potentially having sex, like was so strong that it kind of puts you in that frame of mind, which is not a bad thing, but just it made me think of that age. And since there's 4 of them, it kind of felt like they must all be in that place. Although in early 20s are kind of like that too, so that kind of makes sense. Yeah, Eli, you unmuted. So did you have something to say?
No, that I was laughing. That was just great. That's all.
Any other thoughts on Double Date before we move on?
I just want to second something that's already been said, because it's part of the opening questions, that I agree that it's hard to see this one especially fitting into the theme of the other ones. In terms of the style, it's the one that departs the most significantly from the format that the other ones are presented. So that was just my 2 cents on whether this is a standalone story or if it belongs in a collection with the rest of the submission.
Okay. Shall we continue onwards, my friends? Here we go. A warmth at the base of your skull. Let's move on to this one. Yes,
it was my
Ian.
second favorite of the whole submission. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I thought that I mean, again, very evocative use of the second person there. I'm not used to reading stuff in second person, but I like this a lot, especially because it starts in such a sentimental place and then moves into that kind of sense of deferred longing where, like, you've had a childhood crush and now you're old enough where you can do something about it, and it's time to do something about it. And then you kind of put yourself out there to see if you can do something about it. So I was really pulled through that story there. I thought that the details were really great and the characterization was solid, and the tension, I know it's just like half a page, but like the tension and suspense about whether that feeling is going to be reciprocated, I thought was really solid. So I really enjoyed this one.
Other thoughts? Colin?
Yeah, I like the imagery a lot. It definitely put you like in that place. So I felt like, yeah, definitely like the descriptions in this one. It was, I don't know the right word, evocative or something like that. It pulled you in, definitely. So yeah, I enjoyed this one too.
I do have a question about this one. If if that makes things a little easier, I'm wondering about the second half of the first paragraph, just kind of how that comes off to you all, especially the parts about like from like your hand brushes to the end of that paragraph.
I had just the unbridled truth, so the clouds brighten with the sun. It felt, I just wasn't sure exactly what the unbridled truth was, how would it do the clouds brightening with the sun. Everything else is kind of very concrete. Even, it's poetic language, but it's concrete. It means something specific. And that part of that sentence, these are so small that, a half a sentence matters, I think. And well, unfortunately, even in something that's 4,000 words long, half a sentence matters. So I think that part, I would say, I wondered about. Are there people with that half of the paragraph?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I think I understand the meaning of. I mean, I think anybody reading it can understand the use of anaphora and what it's for. But I know that part tripped me up a little bit, even with the first 2 sections, which kind of set me up to read this in a more poetic way. That starting with who's as a, as a possessive, but using it in the beginning in a sentence that's already kind of, or in a paragraph that's already kind of dense. I don't know, something about the way that flowed was a bit like tripped me up a little bit, which given how short it is and given how much attention the author pays to this wonderful use of language, that seemed like it might be relevant.
Great. Thank you.
And I guess whose house you saw on New Year's, when fear that yours would need a new heart enveloped you. I think I was a little confused by what the your was referring to. Is it your house, your new year? I guess I wasn't sure about that. Any other thoughts on that half a paragraph, since we did have that specific question from Eli? New. Okay. Any other thoughts on this story in general? Anything stood out that you want to talk about? Something you liked or something that you want to talk more and mention?
I like the callback where it says ripples here, no doubt, because the previous mention of feeling ripples. I just thought that strengthened it. There's some grammar stuff that just I can't tell if it's purposeful or if it's not, and that I don't know what that means, but that I think maybe makes the piece a little bit weaker or harder to read than it necessarily needs to be. But that stuff I think you just pick up when you go through it a few times.
That is true.
I would say generally I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed all the stories. I like the feeling it evoked. It's just it was like with the very first story we talked about, the golden hour, it conveys such a clear kind of sense of feeling or place. In this case, it was, I think, a sense of feeling, maybe not quite longing, but just the emotion that it conveyed was like the kind of physical presence that we got in the first story. It felt really grounded and well-defined.
I will move on to Reason 3D Eat Ice Cream, another of the wonderfully titled stories here. Anybody? Yes. Okay, we're moving on to Reason 3D Eat Ice Cream. And yes, again, general thoughts. Ian, yes, please.
I liked this one. According to my notes, I liked this one the most. Yay. Because I've got a long history with accidentally killing butterflies. That's how I learned about death when I was too young to really comprehend it. And then it cast a pall over the rest of my life after that moment. So I really connected personally with it. But structurally speaking, it introduces a really solid kind of like ho-hum situation driving down the road. I can relate to that. And then it introduces an element of mystery to it about the things that, the thin bits of black plastic and how that's like you're the only person who's going to notice it because everybody else is asleep in it. And then by the end, it being butterflies, I thought that was great. There was only two parts of it where I got tripped up. One was in the fourth line where it talks about your co-vacationers being friends or family. And I would expect the driver to know if they are friends or family, maybe friends and family, friends and or family. I don't know. That one was a confusing moment of question for me to try to figure out who was in the car. And then there's a later point where the protagonist realizes that it's not small black folds of plastic bags. I guess this is the third paragraph from the end. And I felt like by the time that was being revealed in the narrative, I had already pieced that together. Like we'd already seen the mosaic of murder, mass murder on the windshield. So I didn't know if that was a necessary line to have there. Maybe it would have been better earlier on while we're trying to figure out the puzzle. But overall, I really liked it. I thought it was powerful. And yeah, I don't like to kill butterflies.
Okay, going off what Ian just said, there's another part right in the beginning where it's or how we open the story. You're going to see some ruins, mines probably, old power rocks, whatever. And he's the driver, or the character is the driver, right? So that seems to be intentional, this vague disconnect, this like particularly painting a story that has highly vivid and specific imagery in a specific circumstance, and yet a number of details which would be important and are clearly important are specifically told to you, the reader. I don't care about these. These don't matter at all. And that was so interesting and intentional, whether by gut or by brain. And I just really wanted to ask the author about that, actually. Like, why would you do that? Because it's such a cool and yet, to me, baffling or mystifying use. And if there's something clever behind that, I wanna know what it is.
I had a sense it almost felt like someone teaching you something, like like Buddha or something saying, you're doing this, not this specifically, but something like this, and this happens. It's supposed to teach you something at the end of it. That's what it felt like to me. Kind of like that kind of style, where the narrator is purposefully, you weren't actually there. The narrator is just saying, well, you might be somewhere like this, and this happens, and then you think this. That's what it felt like to me. Right.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that it sounded like a guided meditation to me, kind of, that went wrong. But also, yeah, the family being in the car, I didn't see the significance of that. It's all very imagery focused, and the family's just kind of there. I wasn't sure why.
Well, I think there has to be at least one person. And I was going to speculate on what you just said, Jared, and Eli can answer this, I guess. But yeah, what I come away, I mean, I love the imagery in the story. I find vivid and wonderful. And as, I don't know if being a humanist, this really equates to that or not, but, is kind of is what I said earlier about what I think of humans as a species. It's like I just see this mass murder of the butterflies as being horrible, and I thought, in response to Ray, I think at least one person has to be in the car to kind of indicate how most people feel about other species on the planet. Like, they don't matter. It's like, yeah, my dog matters to me, but I don't care. You can kill 10,000 wolves, and they're just wolves. They're stupid animals. It's like, and I think I wonder if that's why that first part, as you were saying, Jared, is kind of so distant from the family, is because they're trying to almost like show humans are really in a universal sense, no different than the butterflies. I mean, we don't matter. I mean, we live for what? A gnat's fart of time and a geologic scale, and we're gone. I mean, we really are, in the scheme of things, no different than butterflies. So is that what it's getting at? I don't know. But I did enjoy the story, even though I find it disturbing. Or sad, I should say, maybe.
I got to second Brad's notion there that reinforces my conviction that the ruins Mayan probably is brilliant, like Adine was talking about, because it's treating the indigenous people of the land that you're traveling through like the butterflies on the road. Like, oh, who cares what ancient great civilizations ruins we're going to? It's probably Mayans or something like that. So I concur. I think that actually strengthens the way that the rest of the piece goes, by having the driver not be invested in the specific ancient civilizations ruins that they're touring.
All right. We could. I want to go through. Eli, would it help you to tell us, or do you feel like you've gotten enough from what we said?
I think it would help you guys if I told you, but I personally am doing just fine. Yeah.
That good, because this is for you. So
Okay,
we have more stories to get to. So
let's
do that. Any other thoughts on reason 3 to eat ice cream? I like saying that. Any other thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say I felt like this one stood out as far as like a story that could stand on its own. Some of the other ones I was trying to like find little connecting either themes or little like images or animals or something. But I felt like this one especially stood out as one that, it followed more of like the conventional short story format that I'm used to. So I was able to like hook into it and take something away.
All right. Thumbs up from Eli. Excellent. Okay. We will move on to the second to last, penultimate the Minister of Love. All right. Open the floor to thoughts on this one.
I want to repeat exactly what Colin just brilliantly said, but for this one right here. So it's been recorded. Just pretend I said what Colin said, because I'm not going to say it as well.
We all heard it.
This one felt like a complete story, or the closest thing to a complete narrative, in the sense of, obstacle, arc, decision making, resonant meaning, theme, and building all of those with everything that's in it.
I'm muted. Yeah,
Could I invite you to say more about that? Because my experience was different. I didn't get the sense that there was any meaningful change, except for, I mean, at the end you tell Papa Cyrus that you love him too, and that's something that hadn't been part of the exchange, at least in the conversation that we had seen. But I didn't come out of it with like a feeling or a sense or an impact on there. So if there was a way to even more articulate what Colin said, it would help me access these.
Even more articulate. I like that. Okay, so to me, it all happens with the character choosing to eat away from Papa Love, I think is the name of the character. Mm-hmm. And the disparity between the choice to draw this guy a handwritten map to what is potentially a place for him to stay, which is what I got from it, and the choice to eat away from him and maintain distance by the character, and the distance between those choices, to me, acts as a change in the character. At least given that it's so short, that's what I took it as.
Ray, your thoughts on this story? Anything you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one and the first story were my favorites because it's kind of similar to the first story. It gives clear imagery. You have a clear picture of it going on, gives you a feeling, and you come away kind of being there in the moment. I guess I kind of like this one too, because I worked lots of customer service jobs. And once in a while, you do get these characters that kind of just resonate with you. And, I can almost imagine seeing Papaya King, or what his name was, Papaya Cyrus, being one of those customers that came into, a burger joint or hotel and kind of made me think about it the rest of the night. So, yeah, I like these ones where you just get a clear snapshot. You can see yourself being in that situation and kind of have these memorable figures that are kind of just enigmas in your mind. So,
yeah, I feel like for these short pieces, it feels like the effectiveness is somewhere in the making it being evocative, and and then feeling, I guess, honest in what it's doing. And I thought that this one did that. I kept putting check mark at the end of the story and saying another mood. Like it just like they make you they put you in a place. They work in that way. Even though they're so short, and even though parsing out exactly why, I guess I could just in the specificity and the relatability. There is something in that second person that does feel like someone's kind of preaching to you from the mountaintop, like trying to teach you life lessons in a way, but doesn't feel forced, doesn't feel over the top, it doesn't feel preachy, even though it feels like someone's preaching somehow. Anyways, that's my thoughts on it. With these short pieces, I just think it's effective because it made me feel something. Other thoughts on the Minister of Love? Yeah,
I had just a minor continuity thought, and it's the opening line says that the burger place doesn't accept cash, and then the second paragraph says that there's a communal tip jar in the back room, and I was just curious what the tip jar was for if they didn't accept cash.
Very, very good point. I didn't notice that. Well done. Those things are always so hard to see in the writing. Even when I'm reading someone else's writing, I miss that kind of stuff. It's always so hard.
And I love the sentiment of sharing the tip with the rest of the with the kitchen crew or what have you, because having worked customer service, like that's the right thing to do, even if the official policy is you don't accept tips. It's just that, yeah, that's just a minor disconnect that I like the sentiment, but the logistics of it raise questions for me.
Excellent. Okay, because we are shooting through these and running out of time, I'm gonna move on to the next one. Eli, any questions on that one specifically that you had?
No, that was perfect.
Okay,
Thanks.
excellent. So let's move on to the last one, just so we can say we did it. The physical touch is my love language, and we are open for thoughts. I'll go. This one was the most confusing for me. It felt the most nebulous. I mean, it's the most, I guess, ambitious in terms of the structure, with kind of jumping around in time a bit. And I think I wanted to understand a bit more the connection between those different moments that we dip into. It's so short, and it's hard to do, but that was what I was left with. Other general thoughts on this?
Well, I have to say I'm left with the question of whether Fletcher shot somebody with that gun, and that's whose leg we just found 8 years later. Because I mean, I find the story really interesting, and in just kind of touching the character's life at the different stages, at different stages. And presumably, one of them is when his father's about to pass away. But yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, no, I found it very interesting. And yeah, I think the way the time shifted, it probably made it more challenging to follow. But I also thought, in a way, it could make the story more rewarding too. But I do have big questions about obviously stories don't have to answer questions like this. They can just leave us wondering. But I definitely wanted to know, what the bone was from.
Ray, I swear I saw you reaching for that unmute button. No, Smithley. Colin, yeah.
I'll go.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one, it's one of the few that has names of characters in it. And in Double Date, you get a pretty good idea of Birat, Bonnie, and Frida. Papa King, obviously, you have a good idea of. But this one, that seems like the names are kind of hollowed. You want to know more about Fletcher and Neva. And definitely I wanted to know more about the bone, what it is, and the gun, what's going on there. So it leaves you with a lot of wanting in this piece, at least for me.
Colin.
Yeah, I thought the structure was really cool. And especially the little section of when I was 24. For some reason, just in a few sentences, I felt like that it was just interesting, and it kind of made me laugh. So I thought that one part stood out to me. But I agree that towards the end, I felt like it was, I was just confused. I was just a little bit I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to take away from the whole thing, especially the last part with thinking of maybe the bone came from a human. I just wasn't sure about that.
Feels like it must be making a connection between the dad in this hospital room and death in nature and death in a hospital room. Anyways, I'm just thinking this right now, but it feels that way reading it again, of that happening. I'd love to get Eli's thoughts on exactly what he was going for, but we don't need that right now. Other thoughts on this story? Adine? Or Ian? Ian, please.
I can cede to Adine, if you'd prefer to hear Adine's thoughts.
Oh, come on. Go ahead.
Just briefly, I have a cow femur among other bones. My wife has a cow femur. My wife has a bunch of bones. Cow femurs, they're huge, they're really big bones. And I felt like the main character, his first guess was their first guess. Again, I keep assuming gender here, and I apologize for the sensibilities. But he guesses that it's a cow femur. By the end, he also guesses that it's a cow femur, and it's like one of the only objects in the story that he doesn't touch, where physical touch is supposed to be his love language. So it was hard for me to get the way that the bone piece connected to the pistol piece and to the father piece. Having two cardiovascular catheters made it feel to me like dad suffered from a gunshot wound, and that was how he got into the hospital. So I felt like there was a stronger connection between the experience with Fletcher and the experience in the hospital room. But generally speaking, it was hard for me to see how they all fit together. It was almost like I was looking at three vignettes, and that they had been grouped under this header of physical touch is my love language. I didn't know that they were any more essentially related to each other than if they were each separate stories as part of the overall collection. But I'll second what somebody else said, that it was difficult to feel what the takeaway was. And the moment where I felt the most was like Colin in the hospital room with dad. I thought that the juxtaposition of the terrible state that his dad was in with the like father son joking around asking about who gave him those hickeys was like just the exact feeling that I hoped that story was going for. Whereas the moment with Fletcher was almost the opposite feeling. I was almost completely terrified because kids with guns is a terrifying idea. Yeah. But we started the story when he was 16, and when he was 8, Fletcher was playing with the gun. So it robs that of any amount of tension because I already know that he survives to be 16. He couldn't have gotten shot. And so that would be my only feedback about that structure, is if the goal is to put that emotion there too, then I would want to find out that the main character survived differently or later. Otherwise, I'm not worried that anything's going to happen to him. Especially if he almost tripped on something, then it means that even if Fletcher shot him and he survived, it wasn't like a crippling injury or anything like that. So anyway, those were my thoughts on there. I really enjoyed the father section.
Brad, yes.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing how much, and I did notice, I did kind of notice that what you just mentioned, Dan, that, you know, it's like, oh, wait, this is 8 years before. So obviously he doesn't get killed, but I still found myself incredibly anxious with this idiot kid pointing a gun at him.
I think I'd like this one. I have the most, like this had the most, like these 3 stories did feel like they had, like I had the most, I don't know how to describe it, but they were the most purposeful, I would say, in that the 3 of them, it's called Physical Touch is My Love Language, and he doesn't touch any of them. And it's kind of his, again, it's he because it's I, but doesn't touch any of them. It's confrontations with death. Yeah, that's kind of the two things. It's physical touch is my love language, but there's no touching, and then confrontations with death. It's kind of like being, yeah, almost tripping on it, almost. If that makes sense.
Explain more.
Okay.
No, I just or is there a question you have for us in terms of, does that come across, or is it feeling connected, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I guess I would, the touching thing, I think I'm curious about if that comes across at all. And then yeah, I guess, yeah, because I feel like y'all have really touched on it pretty well, in that these are more purposefully trying to evoke emotions and feelings rather than like telling like a traditional complete story. Although they're still attempting to like have a full story arc. So yeah, I guess I'm curious how that came across, because it sounds like this one might have been missing something, and like what could help lead it towards that being a maybe not necessarily clear, but like more evocative feeling. Sounds like it kind of dropped off at the end.
I just want to put two quick pins on that. I didn't read attentively enough the first 2 times that I read it, because I thought that he touched the father's toes, and I also thought that he touched the gun that Fletcher was holding.
Mm.
Rereading those lines, I see that his hand was hovering over his toes, and he put his hand up so he couldn't see the mouth of it. So that was my misinterpretation of the physicality of those scenes. However, I also want to say my sub point there is I'm a pretty diligent reader. So if I misinterpreted that scene, then I want to share the blame, but I don't want to be solely responsible for it, and I don't want to sound like a dick when I say that. So that's the nicest way that I can put that, and be like, it should be more clear that he's not actually touching them. But if that's important to you that he's not touching it, I assumed a lot of touch was happening where it explicitly wasn't. Now that I look over it a third time, so that's for me to read better in the future. Ideen, I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. It's okay. So I want to applaud the courage of the structure of the story, because to have no clues that we're doing this jump and skip. Oh, I mean, there are obvious clues, but what I mean is to then move between the stories in such a way that doesn't kind of hold anyone's hand is something that I'm adverse to doing out of just sheer self-preservation and not wanting people to like sneer. But so I really appreciated that when I read it from just a writerly point of view. That said, I don't know what the interspersing adds, and now knowing about the point of the narrative, that it's just meant to be a kind of a consideration or a kind of a navel-gazing philosophical view of interacting with death, then I it almost like you're setting yourself up this kind of brutal task of explaining why these pieces, why these interactions with death, and then mating them all together. And to be fair, a traditional story is like a cheat. We all get to kind of follow these structures, and all that work's been done for us by brilliant people over the years, right? So not inventing, but moving in this direction almost kind of forces new structural questions that I don't envy having to be answered. Not that you have to, but and so yeah, I don't know. First of all, I probably wouldn't have got it anyway. I'm not abstract enough to get this kind of stuff, but that those questions always pop up in my head is like, why, like how moving these pieces nearer or farther from each other, cutting them into each other, to me always feels like a clue or a part of the message or the art, you know, like why cut something up like that? Why piece these together? Why have these moments specifically when you could invent any number of them? That said, you have such a wonderful talent for these, as Jared put it, mood, like it's a mood moments, like just everywhere in these narratives. It ends with this feeling of like somebody hitting a cymbal or, you know, like bong, you just feel the moment land. And that's, I maybe I just enjoy it, but I wanted to praise you for that, because I think you do a great job with that. And whatever your instincts are for those specific areas, yeah, they're fantastic.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I will say that the reason I cut them this way is because it's kind of at the end of each paragraph or section, it's kind of like, are they about to touch it? Is there going to be some sort of contact? And when it's just the midpoint is the like hovering above his dad's feet or toes, and there isn't contact, so there will not be contact with any. And that's why he survives. Doesn't get shot. Yay.
I guess that was the other thing I was wondering, is then what does it mean that there is no contact? And
death, right? Like you don't actually touch death. It happens, but it's the last thing that ever happens. So it's an asymptotic approach where you're like always getting closer, but you don't ever actually do it.
I'm a ghost, so I take offense to that.
And I'm just a reader.
Yeah,
that's Ian. That makes a lot of sense.
And sometimes you feel closer than other times too, and you almost touch it, but then you don't. You survive.
Yeah, I for one I don't know, and maybe because they all go. And that's the question. It goes back to that question of, do these feel like they stand alone or that they go together well? And in a way, they teach you how to read them when combined, because a lot of them are similar in the way that they approach storytelling. And so by the time you get to the last one, you might be more able to digest it than if it was by itself in some ways. But I don't know. Eli, do you feel like you had a good amount of questions answered?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all taking the time to read 6 separate stories. That's really nice.
10 whole pages. I'm shocked when I got through it. Thank you. And thank you, everybody else. Anyone have any last thoughts they want to say? We started a little late, so if people want to have.
Well, how do we do these mixed? Like, that was the big question, right? Do we feel like these are a
yes.
collection? Do they flow
Let's address
together?
that.
Yeah.
Okay, people.
Colin?
Yes.
I mean, I was trying to, but I'm also not the most observant reader. So if there is some sort of connecting point, it eluded me. But I was trying real hard, but I couldn't figure it out if they do connect in some way.
Yeah, what Colin said.
I felt the style.
Wait. Let's make Dean explain himself, because that happened the last time where he just said ditto on Colin.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
I want that
Dean,
unique perspective.
you're on the spot.
Yeah, hold on. Let's get other people. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, fine. We'll let you go this one time.
Well,
Ian,
I don't think that was his actual question. His question is whether they could stand alone or whether they are appropriate as a package. And I think it could go either way. I mean, I could certainly see these in an anthology, and that would be really interesting. But I think if they were published individually in either a literary magazine or some other source, I think that would be fine too.
what about them makes you feel that they would be in an anthology together? What brings them together in that way?
Oh, well, just because, like you occasionally see collected works by some author who,
That's a easy out. Not because they're by the same author. Damn it, Brad.
well, yeah, but I mean that's I guess what I'm familiar with is occasionally like after, who was it? The guy that wrote the short story upon which the Arrival was based.
Stories of your life and other
Ted
stories.
Chiang, yeah, I mean, so his story, some of the stories in that book were so different, and yet, there are probably things that he'd written over the course of many years, and then he gets this, he gets some novel or something published, and then they're like, hey, let's publish the rest of your stories too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that's kind of a cop out, but yeah, I didn't see the stories in a way related, but I certainly don't see them contrasting in such a way that they wouldn't fit together either.
I think the second person stories definitely feel like they go together for sure in that way. The style is very similar. The one with the unique voice, the double date, maybe felt the least like it fit with the rest of them, just stylistically and maybe in the kind of evocative, here's a kind of a impressionist, but specific, but impressionist painting of like, take something from this. Anyways, Ian, you were speaking.
Well, I mean, we were both speaking, and I should have seen that you were going first. To the Ted Chiang point, I'm going to politely disagree with Brad that all of the stories in that particular book were alternate reimaginings of sci-fi. Like they were alternate histories based on certain kinds of technology that were implemented either in the past or in the future in a way differently than they had now. So they were thematically related in that they were all speculative fiction pieces that had a technology core. In this context, I'm going to second Jared and say that the second person stories fit together under a nice umbrella of like #mood, where they all they have that koan kind of feel where you're not entirely sure what happened, but you do come away with it with a feeling, and that feeling is palpable. So they could fit together in that way. I would agree that the double date story is the biggest outlier because it's both in first person and stream of consciousness and run-on sentences, and those are like three major shifts from the other pieces there. But overall, I don't think that they fit together as a collection. I think that they would be most appropriate as vignettes or as smaller pieces adjacent to other pieces. And that's because of that lack of an overall theme of a consistent structure and a consistent voice there. And grouping them under a category like #moods, the only reason I object to that being a valid reason to group them together is that's just storytelling. Like storytelling is about creating a feeling in the reader or the audience. And so I don't know if that alone is enough to group them together, because you could put all stories into the same collection with that criterion. So I don't think that fits. So I like them much better as vignettes, as standalone.
Nice. Ray, you mentioned that you were looking at those bigger picture questions. So what was your thought on this?
Yeah, I prefer them as a standalone, and I guess being the simpleton I am, I like the Golden Hour and Phoenix metropolitan area and the Minister of Love because they're really clear, easy to get. And when I thought of it as a package, I was trying to find this thread that would somehow connect them together. And my first thought was, is this all from the same person? Just kind of recounting different parts of their life. But I really couldn't see that coming together. And so, the first one in the Minister of Love, I could see as standalones. The rest of them, the structure, I didn't read as deeply into them as the rest of y'all did. The structure kind of and the style was something I struggled with just to get through. So.
All right, it's a good answer right here. Dean, I come back to you. Everyone else has talked, I think.
Yeah, I thought I'd escape from the ticking clock we all had. I think it depends on how many connections are necessary to call something a collection, or how many through lines are necessary to call something a sufficiently connected set of elements for it to be a single piece, right? And if the definition is simply, hey, these are snapshots of one guy or one person or one girl at various points in their life, or hey, these are all thoughts that a real person once had, or whatever else it is, like, these are all in second person and they have a vibe to them, then yeah, you can collect whatever you want. But I think Ian's comparison is pretty apt when he calls it like a hashtag, right? Like these are categorical. This is a single category of which there would be many, many possible stories. And the way in which you kind of, almost if you imagine like a block of marble and you're shearing it down, the way in which it creates a single shape is that there's greater and greater links between each piece that eventually create a through line that makes something inescapably connected, right? As opposed to tangentially or obliquely connected for the sheer sake of having them be in one place. So, or another way to say maybe, how do they add to each other in a way that makes it valuable to have them next to each other or in a collected work? And in that sense, I trust implicitly that the author has something, but I have no idea what it is. I'm a Colin about it. I got no sense of it. So that's what I meant when I said, yeah, Colin. And yeah.
Colin, do you agree with? No, sure. Okay. It is 8:10 around, and I think it's a good time to adjourn. Eli, everything cool?
Yeah. If you are curious, about my, like what I see as the through line, I can tell y'all, or if you
Yeah.
want to lead.
I want to know.
Okay, so it all started as I wanted to make stories where men cry, but then just having someone cry felt forced in all of them. So it turned into two things that make me cry, and that is like love and death. And so it looks like 4 of them ended up being about love and 2 of them ended up being about death. So it's not quite as like fully comprehensive or like focused as I would have liked. But yeah, they're either showing like men showing love to other men. I'd like to actually, the warmth at the base of your skull, it's like supposed to be 2 male friends holding hands. And then yeah, it's like showing love to another man, either like, yeah, just showing love or trying to, and then yeah, confronting death in specific ways, I guess.
Like the car was going to show love to the butterfly, and then that just didn't work out.
Yeah, right. And then, yeah, who's crying in that one? I'm not even sure anymore. Yeah.
Now I understand. Well, that is really interesting, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed all these stories very much. Thank you
so
for
much,
sharing.
everybody.
Thank you,
I
Eli.
really appreciate it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Eli.
thank you all.
I'm going to stop
Really
recording.
appreciate it.
Here we go.
All right.